Well, our time with Discount Rod Stewart has finally come to its natural conclusion here on V'ger Please, a heinous trip at Warp 5. My name is Joseph.
And I, for one, am happy to say farewell, Discount Rod Stewart. Skip you later, motherfucker. Your co-host, Peter.
And today is a glorious day, a wonderful day, a day we've always been looking forward to, and that is when we get to say sayonara to Enterprise as a whole. We reviewed every episode. We have digested every season, and this is our Enterprise rip for the whole show. And it's a moment to transition, as we've discussed last week. We'll be taking a brief break-ish here in spring of 2024. We'll be going every other week for a little over a month as we get ready to prepare new episodes, do some homework, and launch into our next adventure, which is DS9. But before we do that, I want to make sure we give Enterprise its due and really digest what was the end point of Berman Era Trek. It stopped here. We've seen its end, and I think there's a lot to digest. First, my thanks, as always, to Ian and Sarah, who created two themes this series. Not only the banger Enterprise theme that had made me laugh essentially every time I edited an episode at 32 seconds or so, but the incredible banger that is the Mirror Universe mix that we'll be using actually as our official RIP theme from this point forward, so we can get some proper use out of it. So thank you to both of you, as always. And thank you. We've got a bunch of fans who've, really gone out of their way to talk us up, and some are creating some things on our behalf as we get ready for DS9. Folks seem very excited, very excited for you because you haven't seen it and you're going to get to watch it.
We have fought an ugly chemical war in the trenches. This is World War One.
It was, right? Yeah.
And
we're war heroes, you and I.
Finally, we've taken enough mustard gas that Enterprise has killed us, and we get to go to fucking Stovacor, which is Deep Space Nine, which I am told is the true Star Trek snobs' Star Trek of choice. So I do want to say this, Joe, while we're handing out congratulations to you and me for this being the first Star Trek series that we've actually posted reviews for in the entirety. No one's ever thrown it in our face, but we did technically miss one episode of Voyager, so that was not a complete. That was the, of course, 7 of 9 false accusation episode that we decided.
No, there were two. There were two, if you recall.
We skipped 2?
Well, so we didn't skip 2. We skipped 1, which was the 7 of 9 accuses someone of rape falsely.
Well, we started, and then the internet ate it. The broadcast fell apart and the audio was lost.
And we could have restarted because we're only about 25 minutes in, and you and I figured out there was no way we were going to be able to make it funny. It was just going to be, and if we made it serious, it was going to be depressing. But we also recorded an episode about the crazy B'Elanna doesn't want to have a Klingon baby episode, and it was actually a very good episode, and the audio was fucked up, and I was not able to save it, if you recall. And you were upset about that for a while because it was about parenthood, something that you had a keen interest in talking about, and then that is the only episode of V'ger Please that is truly and completely lost
in space.
Yeah.
Oh well, congratulations to us for getting all 4 seasons worth of episodes up.
Yeah, and by the way, didn't miss a single Thursday for 2.5 years with content. So that's why we're taking a little bit of break. I need a break, guys. I did this by myself every week. I need a break. You're going to have to accept it. We thank you. We appreciate you. We really do. It's actually thank you to all of you who made it through all of this. This was a lot of ups and downs. And I continue to be a
lot of downs and then a lot of ups.
Yes. Yeah. I shouldn't suggest that it was both. It was really one of one and one of the other.
Well, hey, since we're taking this vacation, you are obligated to use your vacation time to watch all of Fallout on Amazon Prime.
I'm very interested in making sure I finish it. I've started it, but you loved it so much you've already finished it.
I had a literal gun to my head by my wife to burn through those. I've not binged a series that fast in a long time, and with the lows that season 6 of Sopranos has been able to drag me through, it was a welcome change of pace. I don't want to spoil anything too much because we're going to be doing some Patreon content reviewing Fallout. But if you're not watching it, get out there and watch it right now. And what an interesting time for Amazon to start with fucking commercials on that. They are making a boatload off of Fallout right now, I am sure.
If you think that you would like a Voyager, if you think you would like a Voyager Please Patreon episode about Fallout, you may get your wish. Let's put it that way. If we're both gonna watch this thing, that could be where we wind up. It's got that sort of nerd Venn diagram thing going for it. I think the people would understand if we did that. You know,
absolutely.
One last thing I did want to mention is I was recommended to watch X-Men 97 by our Discord, which is an ad. It is basically they took the X-Men animated series from the 90s and just said, what if we just made another season of this, as if it was literally following on the 4th season of the show.
Things you can do when you're dealing with cartoons.
Right.
If only live action was so easy.
And they said it's really good. It's really good. I watched the first episode. I'm like, I mean, it was fine. Animation was actually really good, and particularly in the fight scenes, which I'm, a fan of that. And but he kept insisting that, like, no, it actually gets good. It is very good, actually, from a dramatic perspective. Shockingly, the show suddenly takes this turn where it not only is it essentially adopting X-Men comics very faithfully, but also treating the soap opera part of X-Men with a tremendous amount of seriousness, which is, in my opinion, the reason why X-Men is so beloved and why it has such a huge fan base. It's because it has this extremely complex relationship drama that's occurring within the story all the time.
It's because somebody inside of Disney realized that if you do the thing, the people will give you the money.
Yeah. Well, they do the thing really, really good too, in its own way, right? Like
why'd the guy get fired? We're going way off track here, but why did the showrunner get fired? Do you know?
He may have committed sexual indiscretions of a serious nature.
Those are real popular these days.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of sexual indiscretions that can destroy television shows, Star Trek Enterprise.
Oh boy.
Broken Bow. Season 1, Episode 1. Let's start with the biggest conversation topic out there, Joe.
Yes. I think that this has developed over the last few weeks amongst our fans. It's developed between you and I would like to commit a significant amount of time to discussing it. And that question is this. Did the decon chamber scene in the premiere episode of this program kill it immediately? Did it die when it was sexy rub down time with Trip and T'Pol? And I do think that the answer to that may very well be yes.
Let's look at what Star Trek Enterprise was going in. Deep Space Nine wrapped. Okay. If anybody was still watching Star Trek, they had to get on board with Voyager.
Correct.
Voyager had a vibe. And we talked extensively about what that vibe was. And towards the tail end, the vibe changed. There was a very strong feminine voice up front. We had a very large base of our listeners that are women that came on board initially with us because we were doing Voyager and was strongly loved.
Yeah. And to this day, 40% of our listeners are women, which I don't think is going to be the case for most Star Trek podcasts with two middle-aged men who,
poop and fart jokes.
Who kind of have humor in that lane, right? Like we've even retained a relatively large female listenership, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that we started with a show where that absolutely was the case.
So you go in to Voyager, strong feminine voice, Kes, Janeway, Torres, not a lot of sex elements there. Certain point, people get involved. They go, all right, ratings are dropping. Let's horny this thing up. They bring in 7 and 9 in this baked potato cat suit. They're looking for Space Barbie. They turn out getting a great actress who does an amazing job. And after a rocky start with the same tired ass loop of Space Barbie doll wants to become a real girl, by the end we get some good plot development. It's a strong character, whatever. Hey, now here's the next Star Trek show. And I feel like they took a lot of bad cues out of the tail end of Voyager and they said, let's spin this and make it the focus. Let's make violence the focus. Let's make sex the focus. Let's make adventure and action the focus. And by golly, we're just going to knock it out of the park. And hey, just for funsies, let's sprinkle a lot of boomer humor in there.
One thing about Voyager first, we discussed this during the rip for Voyager, but the inclusion of 7 of 9 starting in season 4 did not ultimately lead to higher ratings for Voyager. It stayed semi-stabilized through the middle of season 5 and then basically never recovered after, and this will shock you, Dark Frontier. So Dark Frontier was the last time like they got good ratings in the middle of the season for anything. It was just the premiere and the finales that tended to overperform. Okay. No episode of season 6 or 7, aside from the premiere, did better than, let's see, let's pick a random season 3 episode. Rise. Remember Rise, the elevator
Space
episode?
Elevator. That's
Yeah.
prime Super Tuvok canon there.
Considered a bad episode by some people, I suppose.
I think we like that
six,
one.
We both like that one. 6.76 million people watched that. Okay. Season 6, which we called season sucks, the premiere got 6.16 million, and no other episode in the season did better than that. And by the end of the season, it was below 5. And all of season 7, same story, except for the premiere and the finale was mired in much lower ratings. So the inclusion of 7 of 9 as some sort of rating savings, like that they wanted to make sexy time was going to be the way they got people to watch, was a false premise from the start. Right? There is no evidence to suggest that move helped Voyager at all. Right? It continued to slowly decline in viewership. And so the fact that they decided to lean all the way the fuck in on being the hip, fresh, sexy Star Trek, which is clearly the vibe they went for is madness. They succeeded in finding extremely pretty people to be in the show. We've said that many times. There is not an ounce of fat on anyone except John Billingsley, who's the only one who gets to not have his shirt off for the
And
most
even
part.
he has his shirt off.
Yeah, once, I mean, he does have his shirt off once, but as a joke, right? Like everybody else, iron bodied. Even Scott Bakula lived in the gym in his
Yes,
middle
Scott
age.
Jackula.
Yeah, to make it work. But it isn't what the show needed to succeed.
Think about it, though. I want to go back and just reinforce this. You've got the Star Trek audience. Your ratings are falling with Voyager. You swap out Kess. You bring in super hottie Jerry Ryan, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's certainly a large segment of the audience that is going to appreciate the fact that, she's there and the camera focuses on her boobs and butt as much as it can. Is it bringing anybody in new? No. Is it hurting your audience base? I think, as Broken Bow will show us, ultimately, yes. There's people that were there for Star Trek. Switching it over into silk stockings did not help, and in fact will end up harming it. But as we said way back in Voyager, these executive showrunners are surrounded by yes men. And it's the same thing with anything else that we've reviewed. They're not getting the feedback they need. They're not having people tell them, no, this is stupid, this is going to hurt us. Or if they are having people tell them that, they're just ignoring them. And they're operating in this vacuum where it's, well, I think it's good. I'm in charge. We're going to push with it. We'll see what happens. And then you get season 1 and season 2.
First 11 episodes of season 1 had pretty good ratings, all above 7 million people. It started falling off with Shuttle Pod 1. That was the first
It's a
one
great
below
place to
6.
hate this
Yeah,
show.
great place to drop off, according to you.
Mm-hmm.
And declined through season 2 to the point where the season finale expands only at 3.88 million. And season 4, as we mentioned, or season 3, when we re-ripped it, we mentioned that season did keep its audience the entire time, which was quite a feat given the serialization of the entire season. So it started with 4 million and ended with 3.91 million. And some episodes in there had a little bit more, a little bit less at times, but it kept a very consistent amount of attention throughout its run. Season 4, which we have both now committed to the idea that this is the best season of Star Trek that we have yet reviewed. Terrible ratings throughout. No one watched it. No
Why?
one.
Where's the spot? What could take great TV that Star Trek fans who are coming into this, what could cause them not to watch it? Is it the death slot this thing got shoved into while they ran out the counter just to hit 100 episodes before they were able to shit can the whole thing?
I think that has everything to do with it. I think the fact that they stuck it on Friday night at 8 o'clock, which is the death slot, cost it 1 million viewers a week. The show only got renewed to a 4th season because UPN wanted to go for one more broadcast season. This wasn't going to be ported over to the CW. Its demo skewed too old, so it wasn't in the Dawson's Creek demo. So it isn't going to be making the transition. So they gave him half the money and said make some content. And they made some fantastic content, but at the time, even then, this is at the throes of when this mattered, 0405. But the fact that it was on at Friday at 8 o'clock is probably why no one saw it.
Tie it back into the decon scene. Do you think it's possible that let's give Braga and Berman benefit of the doubt? Maybe they saw the writing on the wall. Maybe they knew that there were problems brewing at UPN, that this thing might need to start tapping into newer audiences. Maybe Sexy Time wasn't to try and get boomer dads in there. Maybe it was to try and start pitching this thing at the Dawson Creek demographic so it could have some sort of portability onto a different network.
No, and I that's exactly the direction I think I was going as well. To be honest, I think you're right. That is what their attempt was to say it needs to be fresh, it needs to be young, it needs to get a younger demo. Let's do shit we haven't done before. Let's have sexy rub down time. Let's get young eyeballs interested in watching this and try and keep them and try and cultivate them as our new Trek audience. Let's go back to the TOS formula. We're going to get into that in a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
About how that was a huge part of season 1 and season 2, and see if we can't refresh our IPs so that we can survive whatever the future is for this horse that we have hitched our wagon to. But the boomers that had been making this show since the 80s were not the people to make that transition. They did not have the cultural competency and the ability to speak to this audience in a way that was going to attract them in a sustainable way.
And on top of that, they were out of good Star Trek ideas too.
Yeah.
Season 1, and especially season 2, I went through the rips and listened. Like, I forgot how critical and mean we were to season 2. Well, deservedly so. But you're telling hokey, sexy bullshit without there being legit good Star Trek going on. And now it's just a shit show all around. It's a hemorrhage farm. So my dad loved Enterprise. And he tried to get me to watch it a couple times. And the way he always references is the one with the pretty Vulcan, right?
Right.
I'm sure he really appreciated the decon scene. And if I was on xvideos.com looking for some quality time with myself, hey, maybe that wouldn't be a bad porn scene parody, right?
Right.
But as a big chunk of your pilot episode, that thing was a road blockade. That was a truck running into an iron wall. And I felt it. You felt it. It cost me my wife being willing to sitting on the couch and watching this with me. And what we heard from a big chunk of our audience, especially the women, was they just noped the fuck out. When we said we were going to do Enterprise, I can't get through it. I'm sad you're doing it. You should do Deep Space Nine, blah, blah, blah. We pushed in. We pushed past it. And lo and behold, down the road, there's great stuff. But that thing, I I want to know if there was a meeting and like if there was any pushback at the table, like we cannot have this. This is a bad idea. Or if everybody's just like, yeah, I think this is going to land well.
I guess they felt like after Voyager had its slow decline into what was essentially an almost irrelevance by the end of the seventh season, that they felt like something like this had to be the next move, right? They couldn't continue to do what they were doing. And there's some logic to that. They couldn't continue to do what they're doing, but what they couldn't continue to do was create boring, tired Star Trek that people no longer had particular interest in watching. The good Star Trek ideas were there that could have fit into the Berman era paradigm very well, but those guys weren't in the room yet. And so often is the case, they're not in the room because they're not the ones who are boys with the people who have been doing this.
Jump back to Voyager, the episode where Janeway hooks up with the Academy Award winner who lost his daughter, and he's looking for revenge against the space Nazis.
Yes, Resistance.
Resistance, great episode. And the commercial for that is Janeway's a hoe.
Oh, I remember.
She's gonna suck dick to save the crew. Right?
Yeah, that's how they sold it.
Maybe that spiked viewership. Maybe somewhere they had hard data points to say sex sells well on Star Trek, and we want this next series to have a lot of sex. No more of this turtleneck jumpsuit bullshit. Right. I want TNA up front.
Well, it didn't work because at the end of Enterprise's run and the end of the UPN's run, Star Trek went from the most important thing that UPN had, its most powerful broadcast tool, its big ratings earner, to being beaten by reruns of The Road to Stardom with Missy Elliott.
I don't even know what the fuck that is.
Right. It was a reality show from the mid-2000s. And I think the only show on this list that of the UPN shows from 2004, 2005 that I've ever heard of that Enterprise actually beat was Veronica Mars.
And which people say was good.
Veronica Mars was good and got renewed because it had a young audience. And Enterprise barely beat it. It beat it by 1.1 in the ratings, and it was canceled.
Probably cost a lot more to put on Enterprise than it did Veronica Mars too.
Almost certainly. So you're a whole bunch of shows that were both canceled and renewed going into the CW crushed it. No question. And its cultural relevance was truly and completely spent by the time the show wrapped and things were up, which was a shame, as we noted, because just like with Picard season 3, when you're in the throes and you just have one last season, you got to push out the door and you have limited money. That's when the guys with the new ideas get to take a shot at it because there's no future in it. And because there's no future in it, no one's interested in doing it that wants to see like more dollar signs and more work out of it. It's really just a contract job at that point. But because it's that way, everybody's just willing to give whatever ideas you got a shot.
Sure, and also, too, big names don't want to be attached to a dying product.
Right.
Okay, I'm out of here. I got better. There's better things I have access to. Whatever. This fucking guy over here that's been knocking on my door for the past 3 years. Whatever. Let him go down with the sinking ship. See you later.
So in the end, the show was certainly a failure. It's hard to say it was anything else. It was intended to run, the 7 seasons any Trek series had run up to that point. Only got 4. It's derided to this day as the death of its franchise. I would like to,
if it's even remembered at all,
I would like to posit the idea though that it's not Enterprise's fault, right? Like you could say that the demands of a network anchor show killed Trek off from its cultural peak, from its late DS9. this is Voyager season 1, First Contact era, right? That's probably when Trek was the most deeply penetrated into pop culture and the most culturally relevant. And it took about 11 years, but it eventually did die. And you could say it because it became a syndicated television show, and Enterprise just mismanaged the whole affair so badly that it was just dead. But what was the alternative, right? That it stayed a syndicated show? Like that way of doing scripted television died at the same time, right? The world that allowed TNG and DS9 to flourish and succeed didn't really last much longer beyond their existences. And so Star Trek always had to enter into a network TV phase, which meant being more answerable to network bosses and making decisions like having the rub down decon chamber thing. But it's death either through bad decisions on a network level, or it's death by your distribution model no longer having interest in scripted television. And so I don't think it's Enterprise's fault. I think that maybe this was what was destined to happen at a certain level, no matter what. This thing wasn't on CBS, it wasn't on NBC, it wasn't on Fox, and it wasn't attached to a cable network that was going to be able to sustain it in this era.
Disagree. Enterprise's death of Star Trek was its fault, specifically season 1 and especially season 2. This thing shit the bed so hard, it put the entire franchise on a death spiral that there was no recovering from. Had there not been the disastrous first 2 seasons in terms of plot quality, I mean, certainly you can't come in as strong as they did in season 3, but if you could have had an okay season 1 and then got into Xindi stuff and then start really getting more mileage out of the arcs in season 4, I think this thing could have gone the distance. You get enough eyeballs behind something and life finds a way, and maybe the UPN was doomed to fall apart, but I certainly think there would have been some way for them to move this somewhere else where it could have kept going.
You think there's a world where Enterprise done correctly is a big enough hit that it continues, even if UPN, CW, that world isn't that place where it succeeds?
What was the viewership on Broken Bow?
Over 10 million. It was a lot. It was a lot of people watched that.
I mean, people gave it a chance.
They did.
And you can say, well, they didn't give them a fair
deep into season 1. It gave it a shot for a while. 7.14 million people watched Civilization. 7.33 million people watched Cold Front. So halfway through season 1, you still have 7 million people watching this TV show.
I'm looking at my rankings that I did. For season 1, Ike had it come out with 5 trash episodes, 4 bad episodes. My first trash episode doesn't hit until episode 16, which was Shuttle Pod 1. Everything up to that point, and I mean, to be fair, the front half of season 1 I thought was the better half. Fight or Flight, Strange New World, Andor Incident.
Oh, Strange New World was bad. But I understand. You don't agree.
Listen, again, my trash episode, my first trash episode, I called Shuttle Pod 1. Like, there's a lot of room to wiggle on personal feelings on these, but I think overall the front half of season 1 was okay to good. You get into the tail end, you start getting Acquisition, Obtained, Oasis,
Vox Sola.
Vox Sola
continues. It is the room of Star Trek. I think you're absolutely right.
I love Vox Sola. I saw it as trash. And I mean, it's only been a couple, whatever, gosh, when did I do these? I don't know when we start doing Enterprise. It feels like it's been a lot longer than I'm sure it has, but like season 1 and 2 are such distant memories. When I was going through listening to our rips for season 1 and 2, it's like just stuff I haven't thought about in forever. Vox Sola, again, there's stuff that I'm like, I fucking hated in the heat of the moment, and I have very fond memories of it thinking back. Now, I would happily watch Vox Sola again, I think.
It is fascinating in its own way. It demands to be watched in ways that many Star Trek episodes are not. So many questions come up that you want answers to that you'll never find. I swear, if I could ask Roxanne Dawson any question, right? Like if I could be that guy and be like, you get to ask Roxanne Dawson one Trek related question of your choice, she has to give you a full answer. I would say, tell me why the monster in Vox Sola looked like a giant spreading cum stain. Tell me why. Why was that the choice?
I would say, Roxanne, which Bukaki video was your greatest inspiration for Voxel? Because I can only assume that this was an homage to something. What
Sure
casting
was.
couch scenario bore this premise?
But let's talk about the evolution that Enterprise underwent in its abbreviated run, right? So we talked a lot in season 1 and then into season 2 to the extent that we could stand talking about it at all, that there was a clear formula that was taking shape, that they wanted Enterprise to feel more like TOS. There was a real focus on their Trinity, which in this case was Archer, T'Pol, and Trip as the Kirk, Spock, McCoy Trinity on the show, to sort of represent different impulses and different circumstances and trying to build this sort of interdependent friendship between the three of them.
Which is
Uh,
a formula that was only used in TOS. So that's all of TNG was basically ensemble cast, right?
yeah, all
Like
the rest of Remnant
Picard
Era
and
Trek.
Data were the stars, but everybody got their own episode.
Yeah,
DS9, I've heard, at times there's so many side characters, main cast isn't even seen for episodes at a time.
correct.
Voyager certainly was a heavily ensemble cast. So this was kind of its own gamble, getting back to the three main guys, and it's always going to be the three main guys. And yeah, I guess there's some other people too sometimes.
And they gave up on that premise. And they gave up on that premise, I think, because they realized it wasn't working at a minimum. Um, I think we've identified as to why they didn't have good ideas for the premise that were keeping people interested in watching the show. It was certainly better at acknowledging its own continuity, which we have praised it for consistently throughout all 4 seasons.
Terrific at it.
And but it still wasn't able to find a way to translate this premise into the sort of regular appointment viewing that they were getting for TNG in a much more challenging circumstance with all of their different deals that they had to for syndication. So
Again, though, comparing it to TNG and my comments initially, it's just unlikable characters. Maybe somewhere in season 3, I started saying, "Hey, all right, these guys, I finally warmed up to them." I was on board with Voyager guys quick. The
yeah,
episodes were trash, but the characters were good. TNG, what's not to love about any of these guys except maybe fucking Wesley Crusher here and there? But everybody in Enterprise, the first 2 seasons were just like, if you die, it might be a cool thing to watch. And I think a lot of that stemmed from the fact that Archer sucked. And when you've got a bad captain, it's hard to get excited about anybody else behind him.
our first season best character was Shran. Okay, it was not a member of the main cast. It was Shran, and it was not close. And I
And
think
that's not
that's
being jokey and
no,
haha. When let's subvert expectations. It should have been to Paul. I feel like, you know,
no. We said to Paul actually was one of the worst characters because
it
she had no
should
agency.
have been, and
Yeah,
they wrote her so bad that she was wretched to watch.
yeah, agreed.
And
The
you could
actress
say,
was never the problem there. She was probably the most talented actor in terms of what she was asked to do with that character in a way I think she ended up succeeding in delivering.
you
I was
started talking about her casting before we went on air. I want to hear this full story.
yeah, so in part because I want to defend this very point that I'm making. I thought I really was pleasantly surprised at my takeaways of Julian Blaylock's ability of playing to Paul. Obviously, I've seen the show before, and I've rewatched season 3 and season 4 in the past. But this was the first time I think I really took a critical eye specifically to the things the way we do it for this show, right? Like I never had watched this stuff with the intention of talking about it for an hour and really trying to take it apart and understand what worked, what didn't, what was good, what wasn't. she consistently, through the entire show, is the only person who seemed to put in maximum effort into her performances, and was taxed in doing so because her character is a Vulcan, and so there's a very specific line she has to start on, and then they kept, introducing complications that she had to layer on top of that. Right? First, it was the mind meld that screwed her up and gave her Vulcan AIDS. And then on top of that, she's smoking the emotional crack rock. And then on top of that, she's got to deal with everything that starts to go on during the actual Zindi conflict with all the
Before any of
Trillium
it,
D. Yeah,
she's a deviant that's trying to keep it on the DL. All that
right.
stuff with the jazz clubs.
And over and over and over again, she succeeds in providing that performance in a way that goes very underappreciated. And you identified why. Is it's subtle, small stuff never gets noticed like big does by
Right.
nature. And this performance demands subtlety, but it was always there. And that's something I don't think I appreciated before. And I found an interesting anecdote doing research for the Rip tonight, which was that she was the last person cast, Jolene Blaylock was, and she was specifically, they ended up choosing her over other apparently more bigger names or bigger gets they could have gotten, because she was the one that first came the most prepared to perform as a Vulcan, because she was an actual Star Trek fan and sought this role out specifically because she wanted to be on Star Trek, which I thought was a very interesting data point, that she heard about this, she got in for to read for it, and she's like, no, I want to be on Star Trek, I actually like this.
I don't understand how she's the only person that came to the game prepared. Star Trek's a big deal. It's a great paycheck, and you're set for life with, fan service, whatever.
LA people think Star Trek's lame. They do. I think it's lame. And they want the paycheck, but they don't really want to care about this subculture of fans that can be a lot to deal with. And
I
you
don't
deal with
blame
them for
them.
the rest of your life.
Listen, it leaves a permanent mark on your record. But again, anybody who's applying for it knows what they're getting into. And if you're applying for it, there's so much source material out there. Like, if you really want it, watch a couple episodes, figure out what this thing's about. There's Bibles dedicated to this stuff. Good on her for doing the homework. I'm glad she got it. She knocked it out of the fucking park. And it's a shame that you have to watch this thing under a microscope to really get a full appreciation of it.
Yeah. And, I obviously I think highly of Trip as well. I think Connor Trinneer is an underappreciated Trek contributor. But his job was easier because he got to play the big emotional character. And that means he got to do the big actor stuff a lot more frequently. Spoiler, a lot of my favorite episodes feature him quite specifically. But overall, taking the whole thing in total, as one must when we were reviewing the series, Jolene Blaylock was awesome. And I think that just like Jerry Ryan before her, the fact she was cast for her physical attributes over her acting ability is certainly in play. But the fact that her specific acting ability and desire towards Trek actually put her above the rest of the pack is something they utilized relatively well in for the series. Although in season 1 in particular, they didn't know how to write her yet, and so they weren't giving her agency in any of the episodes that were about her. Certainly changed that. They changed that, but they had a rough go at the beginning.
Flip side, you got Hoshi.
Ugh,
Linda Park.
what a waste.
And I want to talk about that. We're going to give our first award here. I'm going to go for the top shelf right off the bat. Weak as shit.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of bad stuff in season 1 and season 2 that I can sit there and hammer on. Dear Doctor, which was a piece of atrocious writing, so bad at the last 10 minutes of that episode that it absolutely stained the character of Archer and Phlox for the next 3 seasons. And it was very difficult to separate that. But, being objective and looking at the entire series, my weakest shit award goes to everything they did to hamstring the character of Hoshi. This was initially a TV show about Trip, DePaul, and Archer and their adventures and blah, 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 blah. And there's other people in the back. I think out of the entire secondary cast, Phlox probably comes out as the best character overall, but Hoshi could have been right up there with him. I think the actress had the talent to pull it off. And I think out of everybody who was in that bridge, that her character had the most growing, feel good growing. Archer started off as a petulant baby, and watching him have to learn how to put his pants on was infuriating.
It was.
She had an interesting angle that was not disappointing and disgusting. This reluctant hero who slowly starts to get her faculties in order, and every chance to capitalize on it and push things forward, they either fucked up, like the Orion episode right at the end, where she should have been the one kicking the shit out of the bad guys and shooting them on the bridge in like a legit moment of like deserved girl power, or going back to what's the episode where they get blown up, where Earth gets lasered? Season 2.
Oh yeah, the one, the fake future, right?
No, The Expanse.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Where there is a scene that gets deleted. That's her in her quarters with Archer.
Oh God, yeah, the deleted scene where like Archer thinks she's gonna leave, and she's like, "Nah, bitch, I'm not leaving you. Are you kidding me?"
Turns out I'm going to be ride or die now, and I'm getting rid of all of my knickknacks and bullshit so I can fit more books on the shelf to really be the person you need. And then Archer's like, well, hey, what's all that? What's that big box here? That's all my cocktail dresses and stripper outfits in case I go on an away team mission. Jump forward to that. The ridiculous sexualization that they do on that, which par for the course. I mean, certainly Jolene Blaylock got it all the time, but the few times Hoshi does come out of the closet of forgotten toys, they're using her as a bullshit sexual object. You know, they did do her a solid in the Zindi stuff when she's getting her brain eaten by parasites and like some real deserved girl boss shit goes on there. But, you know, I can't feel upset that Reed was a miserable thing to watch 90% of the time. Mayweather was stymied by a bad actor, but even he was able to hit some fun parts here and there. Hoshi was the perfect combination of a character with a ton of potential and had a good actor. And they just let it wither on the vine and fucking die. And that really is my weakest short shit for Star Trek Enterprise.
I completely agree with you. I did not consider it in the weakest shit category because we so often focus on horrific plot botches. But in this case, this production failure is so absolute and so defining of Enterprise's overall failure that I am complete agreement with you. Like, we have belabored the point, but this is kind of our last chance. So I'll do it one more time because I think it's my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to criticizing the show.
Well, just one last thing about Hoshi. Why I'm moving it into like weakest shit category is there's so many fucking waste of time episodes in season 1 and season 2 that I'm looking at the list. I have no recollection of whatsoever. So much wasted fucking time. You could have gave her some juicy ass scripts, and instead we got whatever the fuck Civilization was.
She got 3 episodes over the entire run of the show. 3. Now that's one more than Mayweather, who got 2, but it was inexcusable because obviously, like, Linda Park is a much better actor than almost everybody else on the show. In her limited screen time, that was always evident. She's much more charming and able to do whatever is necessary for a scene. And her character, as invented, is extremely relatable. She's essentially not a Starfleet person. She has no particular interest or desire to go into space, but she loves languages. She knows that she is the biggest language genius on Earth, and for reasons that I think that you have firmly agreed with not long after the show started, they seem to have this incredible subtext where Hoshi was in fact Jonathan Archer's ex-girlfriend. And this has left her with a deep and abiding friendship with Archer that she feels responsible for following through on and be his translator.
And has a special ability to break rank without incurring wrath.
Right.
And you jump into something like Cogenitor, which is, again, why she's in this weakest shit category. Cogenitor was a fucking piece of shit, and it was terrible because it was ridiculous that the commander of the Enterprise, Trip, went off and did all this
Yeah.
treaty
Second
breaking stuff.
officer of the ship, someone who should be a senior leader doing something that stupid.
And then you got Hoshi sitting there that feels to me like the entire script was written around her doing that. And it says, no, we don't want Hoshi to do this. Give Trip another episode. Make him the guy to do it. Just infuriating. And it's bad pairings when you got the right toys to get the job done, and it creates a waste of time bullshit episode that drags people away.
Yeah, and her 3 episodes end up being the Fight or Flight, which is the second episode, which was pretty bad. Vanishing Point, the Transporter Hell episode, which was pretty bad. Exile, where she's in the cocktail dress, pretty bad. And then, yeah, like you said, when they bust her out, it's so that her shirt can fall off in Shockwave Part 2, where she can make out with literally everyone, and Mirror Darkly Parts 1 and 2. Like, they kind of used her for the sex angle, put her in some real shit episodes, and otherwise left that potential completely rot on the vine, up to and including that her best scene in the entire show is a deleted scene.
No, I'll give her best scene fighting the Zindi.
Okay, yeah, no, second best scene. Her first best is attempting to further lock the computer and then commit seppuku while brain worms are in her head. Like, shows that she has come the whole distance.
And then even go the extra fucking yard to make sure that her and her entire family starve to death.
Yeah, they screw over her backstory, so she's a tragic death. But hey, you know what? She did tell Federation President Tan Elbern to sit the fuck down while she got to command Enterprise the one time in the finale. So, yeah, it wasn't a total waste, I suppose.
Joe, give me your total waste. What's your weakest shit?
I was just gonna go with Dear Doctor because I just thought we should beat that up one more time. But after you gave me the Hoshi pitch, I'm like, actually, that's way better. Like, but I mean, special mention though for Dear Doctor, right? Like,
it was an awesome episode, and I've got it listed as a great episode until the end.
And not just because of Phlox, but because of Archer.
Yes.
And it's like re-emphasize that. Phlox deciding that was not appropriate for him to intervene because he has this macro view of species development that overrides the personal sense of ethics that a human would feel is a story beat that is a bit awkward, but one that I can probably get behind.
And it's also part of his character growth because by the end of Enterprise, he has gained humanity.
He has.
At this point in Dear Doctor, he is a alien with some troubling medical ethical views.
He's
Archer presenting options.
It's Archer deciding that that's an argument he's willing to accept, that it's the weakest shit of Enterprise. Like,
it's the hero.
Archer is never... There's nothing in the story that suggests that there is any rationale or any reason for which Archer should accept that as anywhere approaching something he should consider. Everything we know about Archer and everything we know about humans would suggest he can and should immediately tell him, give them the fucking cure you found. Are you fucking serious? What is wrong with you?
Archer condemning everybody to death because he doesn't have an SOP to follow. Take stuff like the Next Gen episode where Data has a pen pal and her planet's going to be covered in volcanoes and, you know, they have to just stand by and let them die because they're a pre-warp civilization. It colors all those Prime Directive ethical dilemmas and taints it with, was the Prime Directive written because one time Archer made a really shitty rules call and rather than say, oops, I fucked up, he decided just to fucking dig his heels in and say, anybody who's pre-warp, if they're in trouble, if they get fucked, they stay fucked. Because that's what I did. And God forbid I admit to myself that a lot of dead children are on my hands.
Well, first, I would say the Prime Directive is Star Trek and the Federation's most contentious idea and the one that I agree with the least. So if it's because Archer wanted to cover up his boo boo, that I'm willing to accept that as an explanation.
Sure.
We're 50 minutes in. We're not going to do as many awards, I think, as we have in the past. We were more interested in chit chatting about the show, but there's one set of awards that I think we have to give, and that's best and worst episodes. And I'd like to start with the best because there were some highs. We've talked some shit. The show was a failure. It may or may not have directly led to the death of Berman era Trek, but there was some good shit in here, and not just in season 4, not even just in season 3. I want to give my top 5, and in this specific order: Similitude from season 3, my favorite episode. I do think that is a quintessential Trek story. I think it is possibly the most Enterprise story, right? Like, it's really like a story that is very specific to not season 3, and to the characters of Enterprise in a way that you couldn't like recreate that, I think, in another Trek series. And it's certainly both Connor Trinneer and Julie Blaylock's shining moment in terms of acting and performing the nuances of their characters in a way that made for very compelling drama. Loved that one. Loved Trip's speech about when he's Sim about, what memories are mine, what are yours, or what was his. Just perfect. Had a good kid actor in it. I mean, you couldn't ask for more. Second, Cold Station 12, followed by Demons, followed by Mirror Darkly Part 2. Those were my top episodes from season 4. So I won't mention why again. They're all excellent. And then my next one down is another season 4, which is Observer Effect. Probably
Was that
the
season 4?
Yeah, so that one I love. Again, is a fantastic Trek episode, and it's probably the best Archer moment. In that, he had to make the speech into the void, as you said, about why humanity deserves to live, why it deserves respect. The episode does a great job of telling that story. But special mention to Ceasefire and Canamar from season 2, actually, which I didn't put in my top 5, but were actually very good amongst the whole sea of shit. And I feel like we don't lose sight of there were some good episodes in those first 2 seasons, even if they were scattered amongst less desirable viewing experiences.
It's funny now that I've categorized all of my episodes. I got 9 trash, 13 bad, 15 meh, 33 good, and 27 great.
Doesn't sound like a bad series to me when you put it like that.
It doesn't. It was very surprising to see that in there. And it's because season 3 and season 4 are just hot shit.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's hard to sit there and pick favorites because from like halfway into season 3 on, it basically feels like one big long episode. Like everything is hot on the heels. Like Anxiety Prime Ford, it's just nonstop go, 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 go. And then you get into season 4 and the arcs congeal into single episodes. I'm going to go with Cold Station 12 because it was fucking amazing. And, it gave us 2 podcasts worth of material to talk about. Lore rich, as well as just great acting.
The best OSHA violation that you could possibly ever imagine in Star Trek.
Yeah. And it's nice to see that humanity was able to produce it. In A Mirror Darkly, which is a shame that one of the best, one of the most fun, one of the most wonderful episodes of Enterprise is not about Enterprise at all. Impulse, just a great episode for what it was, and fun departure, but intense. You got the backdrop of all the mystery of the Delphic Expanse and the stakes, the strings that were attached to it, the follow-up effect that it has when Archer's getting debriefed later on. Like, that was just a great piece. And past those 3, I feel hard-pressed to pick another 2. There's so much good stuff on there. It is funny though to look at the great entries from seasons 1 and season 2 and then try to compare them against what
Yeah.
3 and season 4 were.
Relatively speaking, you probably would downgrade some of those, right? Like,
Oh yeah,
would you call, well, you might call Canamar, Con Aramar, as we called it, still great.
I
That
would.
was, but
I
what,
don't know.
but like,
Or a catwalk.
yeah, that's probably going down a tier.
Which
Catwalk's
one was
going down.
Twilight? Was Twilight the what if?
Yeah, Twilight was the fake future one.
I think if I'm going to pick two more, I'm going to go with Stigma, which was T'Pol hiding the fact that she was like mind raped to keep mind melders from like catching additional shit from Vulcan High Command, especially in light of all the later Vulcan development stuff. Like Stigma really takes on a different connotation and reinforces that what she did in that was good. Stigma probably being one of the strongest entries in the entire early seasons as to the potential that T'Pol has as a character when they don't severely limit her options. And I don't know, man. Dead Stops always just stood out to me as a fun episode. A cool space is goofy and zany shit happens. And like encapsulates the wondrous early season vibe of we're out here and we don't know what the fuck we're doing.
Right. Like that was capturing that essence well. And it's also, the second half of after they got blown up by the minefield. So it was one of those spots where there was clear episode to episode continuity
Yeah.
in a way that made it feel like more was going on in its
Yes.
runtime than it actually was, because it was the essentially the consequences of the prior episode meant trying to find some kind of like out there solution they just had to interact with, even though they might have shown more caution otherwise. So
Boy, sure is hard picking my 5 favorite episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. Whew, all that hard work, I deserve a break. I need something easy, Joe.
Would you like to name your 5 worst? Would you like to bathe in garbage for a while and tell me, Peter, of all of the incredible ball kicks we've delivered over the last couple of years to Enterprise, what were your 5 favorite?
I'm going to start with Precious Cargo, which never
As
stands.
all conversations about the worst episodes of Enterprise should begin.
It does not stand out in my brain as bad.
But
I don't have any ill will for it until I stop and I really start to think about the conversations we had. And it really just encapsulates by the fact you've got Trip, who Colin Trenier was never lazy in Enterprise. I never felt like he was phoning any scenes in. And that dude was trying like a motherfucker. And you can eat as much shit as you want. I see someone eating poop. I'm not going to be like, ooh, that's appetizing. Everything about it was clown shoes. The fucking ridiculous villains and their non-existent motivation, the bullshit I'm a space judge scene, the terrible guest actress, the ridiculous series of events. Like, again, it's not the most offensive thing when I get more mad gut reaction off of these are the voyages, but when you stop and you really watch Precious Cargo and you think about it, like, it is insidious.
it is the only episode of Star Trek I know of where the creators tried to find a way to legitimately not air it, right? Like that alone, that fact alone, that is something they copped to. Like, we knew this was a fucking turd and it is in the bowl. There were people who were afraid they were going to get fired for having their names attached to it. They knew how bad it was before they published it and are willing to admit to that. I think puts it on a different tier. Everything about it is bad, but Padma Lakshmi is the worst actor ever on Trek.
Berman era Trek, because I'm still going to say Raffi is worse.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah. I mean, that, like,
real Trek.
real Trek, right? So, yeah, sure. Michelle Hurd is actually worse, but Padma Lakshmi could not act. She delivers 0 lines in a way that are above conversation. Like, she doesn't show emotion that a person would show, let alone what an actor should be able to craft on screen to deliver authentic emotional, resonance. It was deeply embarrassing to all involved, and it is definitely the worst episode of Enterprise, and it is, in my opinion, without a doubt, the worst episode of Star Trek ever made.
Speaking of deeply embarrassing, how about those Klingons and Marauders?
Oh God.
Cool concept. Hey, here's space Texans out here. These would be strong allies to make. We're going to be good guys. We're going to stick around. We're going to help them fight off the threat. Unfortunately, you're picking a threat of people that could absolutely kick the shit out of you. Your options that you are presented with are eradicate these guys, murder the fuck out of them, or do not get involved because you're going to incur war with the Klingon council. And it would have been a great, like, Archer has to realize that space life is hard and you have to make bad decisions and hard decisions, similar to Dear Doctor. Dear Doctor's, do I show mercy or not? Marauder should have been, do I make war or not? And instead they had this a fight sequence that would have been at home in a Bernstein Bears book.
Yeah, they came up with a zany way to do Home Alone level hijinks to a bunch of fucking Klingons to convince them to skedaddle. Like, that was an effective long-term way to defeat a bunch of guys who have proven how willing they are to murder the shit out of anyone who inconveniences them.
I'm gonna shake things up, Joe, because my next one was going to be Extinction, because I fucking hated that episode.
Yeah.
But on thinking on it deeper, and I only classified this one as a bad, but I'm gonna pick First Flight. That was the Action Grandpa episode.
Yeah, I remember it well.
They could have done so much better in that episode, and it could have resonated so much deeper and longer had they made the changes that we were talking about, where Action Grandpa had stepped on the landmine. The fact that they stole the fucking prototype and they flew out and nobody got in trouble, ridiculous. Had it been Action Grandpa, had he stepped on the grenade, proved that the platform was solid, kept the Vulcan doubters at bay, and ultimately been willing to be court-martialed and lost his command, and Archer have this feeling that, like, he's pretender syndrome?
Yeah, imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, and like have to live up to Action Grandpa. Like, you could have done really great stuff. Like, there's cool things in there with, hey, this is why Archer, Trip, and Forrest are tight. But that was the biggest. I think that was some of the most consolidated. What we always say in Voyager, it was wasted potential.
Yeah, there was a much better story that was right in front of you there than what they went with, and it wouldn't have taken much to change it. And I certainly agree with, like, giving it a discommendation. But the fact that Trip does all of his complex void engineering from a parts cart with a laptop to help the test actually succeed, combined with those sweet lanyards,
Yeah, those are cool.
Does elevate it, I think, above the rest of your bottom 5 selections. I think Extinction with the fucking bird people mutations is a much more defensible choice.
And to Extinction specifically, like, again, everybody tried. It was a stupid script, but it was kind of fringe. Had it been a slow transformation, it would have been okay. Them turning into bird people within 40 seconds, condemn that thing to fucking crib death. Crib death. Acquisition.
Oh,
An episode so wretched that I forgot even existed until I was listening to the season 1 rip. Just a horseshit script of nonsense that had no business ever making it to print. And then the cardinal sin being that you had Neelix, and you had fucking Jeffrey Combs. You had A++ guest acting talent, and you subjected him to this fucking thing. Fuck you guys.
it was astonishing in how poorly written the whole thing was, from to Paul being like the coquettish sex kitten that was giving them ear hand jobs as like a ploy, to the almost cartoonish way in which the serious threat to the safety and freedom of everyone on the ship was being treated as a comedic episode by these murder rapists,
Yes.
Ferengi, who was coming there to plunder them and steal their women and put them into slavery. Tonally, it didn't make any fucking sense. And like you said, the fact that they had brought in A+ guest actor talent and then waste it in this way was just,
Unforgivable.
yeah, yeah.
And speaking of unforgivable, I'm going to hand you the baton for my fifth because I know it's on your list as well. Please, Joe, tell me why A Night in Sick Bay is in your bottom five.
I would be happy to. If you want the Enterprise episode that I think actually defines the failure of the show overall the best, it would be Night in Sick Bay. And that is because Night in Sick Bay is an episode about how Jonathan Archer is the worst captain that we have ever seen. Period. His
The
entire
guy from the Equinox who was killing space kitties to try to get home to the Alpha Quadrant.
far better, much more defensible activity.
Sign me up for that guy ship. I want to be on his
Captain
team.
Ransom should have been on the NX-01 10 times out of 10. Archer's story arc in this episode is that this fucking asshole brought his dog down to a first contact on a planet with a species he already isn't on good terms with because he ate in front of them, and they found that disgusting. Said dog pees on a sacred tree, and now they're angry about it. And also, the dog that he decided to bring on this away team mission got a disease, and he's pissed about that too. And he's going to be a whiny, petulant, narcissistic psychopath about how his dog is sick, and he's got to do some humiliating apology ritual to this alien species. Otherwise, he's going to botch this first contact. Like, that isn't his fucking job that he fought tooth and nail to get, and he hates Vulcans for having prevented happening for so long. Like, his entire motivation is to do exactly this. He finds every possible way to fuck it up of his own free will, and then the episode is him whining about it. It's like, this is your hero? This is your guy? Jonathan Archer? This is how you want to portray him? Are you fucking serious?
The only positive memory I have out of that episode is the fact they got Varn Armstrong forced to play the guy, the leader guy that he has to apologize to, and the ridiculous notion that that's like Admiral Forrest basically in blackface fucking with John Archer.
Yeah, like this is just a complicated training exercise. Yeah.
Just us laughing or what, but that is literally the only good part of that episode I can dredge out of my memory.
I mean, Porthos survived, which is nice because he was great. Sure. I have no complaints about Porthos on the show.
No.
Our bottom fives were exactly the same except for one. All right. I had Precious Cargo, Night in Sick Bay, Acquisition, and Marauders on it. So did you. You have Extinction on yours. I have Carpenter Street. Carpenter Street, if you forget, is the Temporal Cold War episode from season 3 when they had to go back to Detroit, which was just LA because there's no palm trees in Detroit, and do a shitty Law and Order episode where they try to stop a bunch of Xindi reptilians who are in trench coats from bioweaponing humanity because he's capturing people to bring them their sacred juices or something. It's bad in a lot of different ways, but it is unforgivable because it forces us to watch someone eat disgustingly a hamburger for what feels like 20 minutes.
It's a real blemish on season 3. And you and I had some good laughs. The real story to tell there was just about some poor, hard working class guys being victimized by an unscrupulous commercial landlord. But gosh, I'm not going to argue with you putting it on your bottom 5. Again, the fact that happened in season 3 was crazy. I want to look at the best we've just named. More importantly, I want to look at the worst. And when we take the worst episodes out of Enterprise, which was a TV show with a terrible first and second season, do you think that Star Trek Voyager had episodes worse than the 5 we just talked about?
Well, we happen to have the worst episodes that we had been talking about back then in front of us right now. So this is what we considered the worst of Voyager.
Well, hold on. Let's distill this down. What's the absolute 3 most wretched episodes we're going to say here? Night in Sickbay, Acquisition, and Precious Cargo?
Yes.
All right.
Concerning Flight, Elogium.
Ooh.
Oh, we're off to a rough start. Drone, Alice, Virtuoso.
Alice really? I've got fond memories of Alice somehow, man.
We have fond memories of Alice because we had so much fun making fun of the fact that Tom Paris clearly has no friends or someone would have stopped him.
I think I love, maybe I've just been sitting in that shuttle too long, but I think I love Alice.
Well, we didn't love
hey,
One
check out
Small
this
Step.
new outfit I got.
We didn't love Fury. We didn't love
One
Night.
Small Step. That was 7 of 9 loves Windows.
Yes. Fury.
Fury was
the
Kes
cast
comes
return
back.
episode. Yeah, that one real bad. Nightingale. Harry Kim in charge. Twisted. False Prophets. For the Ferengi episode. Tattoo. Okay. So
Tattoo.
I think the answer to your question is yes, Voyager produced turds at the level of Enterprise's turds, for sure. In fact, I would say the worst episodes of Voyager, which in my opinion, if I'm rating them based on this list, are Concerning Flight, Virtuoso, Tattoo.
No.
I think
What's the second one you ran? Elogium.
Elogium.
Here's where the difference between Voyager and Enterprise becomes very clear. Enterprise is an action TV show, and Voyager was a science fiction show. And the bad parts of Enterprise, they make me mad and they suck. But with the exception of A Night in Sickbay, they're not boring. And I would rather watch 2 of these absolute bottom episodes than sit through Elogium again, because Elogium was such a fucking time thief. Oof. That I was watching my watch and praying that the fucking thing would be over. And I don't think there's anything in Enterprise that was ever as much of a fucking slog as the majority of those episodes you read me from Voyager.
Agreed. I was coming along the same point. I think Enterprise's lows were lower than, or I think Voyager's lows were lower than Enterprise's. I really do. I think that Enterprise is the beneficiary of better actors, better characters, not necessarily better writing, obviously, but
not better characters.
I think that we learned to love them a lot, and I think there's a reason for that, and maybe that's difficult to describe in a way that we can quantify, but you said it from the start, I think, in this episode, which is it didn't take us long to get on board with those guys. And that meant the crap didn't feel probably as bad because I still liked Tom Paris. I still liked Neelix. I still wanted to see them do crimes together. I still, I still liked Tuvok, even though I didn't like him when he was a detective. I still thought there was something very interesting going on with B'Elanna as the, hot rod mechanic turned Starfleet engineer. I thought that Janeway, for her,
flip a coin.
Flip a coin of she's going to be written well or not. But when she's written well, Kate Mulgrew turned her into a character you really wanted to see succeed and a captain that you respected. There was Cass, our favorite character from the show. Yeah. The Doctor, second favorite.
Give me the EMH, Phlox, and B'Elanna over almost anybody else on Enterprise any day. Like,
did you take Phlox out of the equation though and put him on Voyager? You saying he's well developed enough by that? That's what you said. Phlox.
I'm sorry, not Phlox. Neelix.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you meant to say Neelix. All right.
Um, yeah, that looking at the bottom crust really answers a lot of questions of what was Voyager, what is Enterprise, and why did they lose a lot of their viewership going into Enterprise. What else we got to talk about here, Joe?
Talked about how Archer sucks. I think we've said that enough that I don't feel too much need to say it anymore.
They can't have him start as low as he did.
Yeah. He got to some place I could respect and found interesting, but it took till season 3.
Took too long.
Yeah.
And they could have made him wet behind the ears or inexperienced from a galactic standpoint, but he was just fucking incompetent for far too long. And on top of the fact he was incompetent, he was a crybaby and a bitch and just inspired no desire to see him on the screen. And, as a result, they were able to pull him out of the fucking gutter and, actually set him up into a captain's chair. He got the most growth, but it was not a rewarding process to watch.
That he was the only pick to play Archer, by the way. They sought him out specifically for that role. They wanted him for the whole run. They had to negotiate a special contract with him. Uh, Apparently, Scott Bakula, he didn't want to do the show unless he knew he could get along with everybody. And apparently, he was. That's another thing I found out researching this is everyone had only good things to say about Scott Bakula from making the show. No one had a bad experience with him on any level. Apparently, he was.
Jump back to the story about him telling people knock it off with the T'Pol sex stuff.
Yeah, like he defended his fellow actors apparently quite voraciously, and he had the respect of everyone that was on both sides of the camera. So I hate to say that it's Scott Bakula's fault that this character sucked. I do think that that's partially true. I don't think he was the right person for the job. I think that if you are going to go with somebody who is going to be fresh, wet behind the ears, somebody who had to learn, they needed to go with a different actor. And if
Younger.
they were go with someone like Scott Bakula, who's clearly supposed to be, I think, portraying someone with experience, they needed to be written as somebody with experience and not have this mismatch that made him look like a spoiled, rotten, overgrown man child.
Also, all the Mary Sue shit going on with him. I'm a pilot. I'm an engineer. I'm a diplomat. Blah, 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 blah. Shooting from my hip, I think Trip would have been a great captain choice. Hothead that had to calm down and learn the right way to do things, and I think a lot of the plots would have fit better
Yeah,
around him.
if you give an Archer Trip's emotional capacity, I think Trip as a character doesn't work in that role. You'd have to change him so that he makes more sense as a leader than an engineer. But I think I get what you're going at, which is your captain. If your captain is going to be naive and has to learn hard lessons, it needs to be someone a decade younger than Archer. And that would explain the whole Wonder Kid thing, which is he is good at everything, and that's why they've put him in charge, because he's got mastery of all of these difficult things such that he can actually run the ship, and no one else has that ability. But what he's missing is the experience in space, but so is everyone else. So send him out there and see how he does. And that's just not Scott Bakula.
Side note, I think one of the biggest underdeveloped things in the show was that mentor, mentee, surrogate father, whatever started coming up in Space Trucker Justice between Mayweather and Archer. I needed more of that.
Yeah, needed to do that a lot. Yeah, that could have been really been something.
That would have been great and good for both of them. And it's a shame they never went anywhere near that thing the rest of the series.
I have one last question before we wrap things up, seeing that we're already at an hour and 20 minutes. Was this worth watching, Peter? I told you it would be. I told you that the fact that season 3 and season 4 ended up being very good, and season 4 in particular was a certified, underappreciated, underwatched turbo banger, which it was, made it worth watching. Do you agree? Was it worth watching?
Was it worth me watching? Yes. Is this something that I can go to a non-Star Trek person and say, hey, this is fucking great, you gotta watch this? No, because I think a lot of my enjoyment came from lore building and exploring the universe and like, hey, this is why things are the way they are. Um, you know, if I had three wishes on this thing, one of the wishes would be that season 1 and 2 didn't happen.
Right.
And I think anybody that you would casually pull in that's not doing a Star Trek review podcast, you say, here's Broken Bow, some Andorian episodes, maybe this Klingon episode, and then you watch Space 9/11 happen at the end of season 2, and then you get into some pretty compelling fucking season 2, season 3. And
I think this is worth telling someone who's watched everything else. It's worth watching, but unless you're a completionist, you don't have to watch much of season one, season two. I think you're right.
no,
Like,
it's exactly what you did.
yeah,
You come into the hot shit, you go, that was great, I want some more, and then you go back and you watch the other stuff because you cannot go through the fucking lows of those first 2 seasons and hold people. And
yeah.
it wasn't until we dragged everybody along with us that our listeners were like, okay, I'm going to push past this the tail end of season 1. I'm going to get past the fucking decon scene. Maybe I might even leave Broken Bow off my to watch list just because that's such a bad precedent.
I said at the time, and I want to reemphasize again, season two of Enterprise was the hardest it ever was to do this show. It was not fun watching those episodes and talking about them. It got very repetitive and negative in a very specific way that wasn't actually very entertaining to talk about at a certain point.
A Night in Sickbay and Marauders were back to back. That's episode 5 and episode 6. That's 2 of our top 3 worst episodes out of the entire series run. How do you get past that?
By the time we got to season three and it was good, we were enjoying it. But I think the fact that the first 2 seasons were as bad as they were and season 2 was so bad
What they call
that
the Trio of Terror?
the Trio of Terror was from Voyager.
Yeah, what was
Um,
it?
they did. Turns out like most of those
I
episodes
like them.
weren't very bad.
Episode 5, Night in Sickbay, Marauders, the 7th. I think that was
that had Senator Kelly in it. Yeah,
T'Pol as an assassin, which that's its own fucking botched plot angle. There was way better ways to do that. We talked about. Your high point was the communicator, whatever the fuck that was. Singularity, which was Space Madness, which was a time waster.
it was bitchy Space Madness. This was a miserable episode.
Vanishing Point, which shit the bed on transporter phobia. Back into Precious Cargo. I'm done. I'm out. I can't watch this anymore. Fucking shoot me in the head.
Yeah. So the show is worth watching from season 3 onward, and because seasons 1 and 2 have so little that you really need to see to understand what's going on, I think you're right. I think the way that I approached it is the way I would recommend other people to watch it, but only after they've watched everything else. But I thank all of you out there who drug us through those dark moments, allowed us to receive into the light. I think we enjoyed overall getting this picture and entertaining all of you with our takes. And we're looking forward to doing DS9. We really are. It's all been leading up to this in a way. Like, we always intended that if we were going to do DS9, it would be, after we've kind of dug through the rest of Berman Era Trek that Peter hasn't watched, because it is the delicious sundae at the end, right? It's the dessert. It's the best. And you want to save the best for last. So that's what we've done, and we're doing homework. Okay, we're returning back to TNG. So first thing, we've got a couple of Patreon episodes you're going to hear.
Well, hold on a sec. You were saving the best for last. I did want to know who would you have picked as your best character?
Oh, for Enterprise?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go back to Phlox. It's tempting to say Shran, but in the end, it's Phlox. And Phlox always was my favorite character from the show.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid pick. I'd personally go with Riker William T. I think his full body of work is just really seasons beyond the.
Jesus.
I was so worried for a moment that I wouldn't be able to pick a favorite, but luckily they were able to bring in 2 well-beloved figures right at the tail end there I could fall back. No, yeah. Uh, Phlox. He, dude's solid the whole way through. He grows and he nails it. But I wanted to make the record joke. That's all. Vanishing point. You can't. We have to mention it one time, right? We're obligated.
There'll be a couple Patreon episodes out in May. Please enjoy. You'll hear from us also on our TNG homework episode, where we're going to cover a whole bunch of, I call them required readings, required viewings. DS9 is very much a product of the world TNG created, and quite specifically and quite purposefully. And I think it pays to go back and observe that. TNG even ran at the same time as DS9 there for the first couple seasons. And so I think we're going to go back to some of those greatest hits. We're going to learn things about Bajor. We're going to learn things about Cardassians. We're going to learn things about Chief O'Brien. And get ready for I think we call it a vicious visit
to Bajor.
Well, we're working on that. And when we're back full time, man, it's going to be every week again. And we are going to do this thing. And yes, DS9 is the Star Trek snob's favorite Trek, but season 1 of DS9, well, maybe not that.
Hey, listen, dude, I got through season 2 Enterprise. Okay, not gonna hold me back. Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready for DS9. A vicious place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
But we live here with you in your hearts and minds and in your podcast feeds, and we'll see you again soon.